Welcome to Radical Dad Podcast, where we dive into the wild and wonderful world of fatherhood with your hosts, Dakota and Kevin. Join us as we explore the highs and lows of parenting, share insightful stories, and challenge the norms of what it means to be a dad in today's society. With a blend of humor and candid conversations, we aim to inspire and empower fathers to embrace their unique journeys. Whether you're a new dad, a seasoned pro, or somewhere in between, you'll find something here that resonates. So grab your headphones and get ready to join the revolution in parenting.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Radical Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Dakota.
And I'm your other host, Cahill. What's up?
Kevin, thanks for coming back and doing another episode. We're 6 episodes in now. It's been fun. 5 episodes down. This is the 6th. We've learned a lot about just everything. Fatherhood, what to expect, what not to expect. Last episode, we touched on the fun shenanigans that is preparing for fatherhood. We jumped into me not knowing what the difference between a zipper and a snap was in a onesie. You touched on the the ideas of checking through ratings and being a very snooty shopper when it came to the ratings, right? I never thought about
Yes, sir.
It's like
Yes,
test driving
sir.
a BMW. You're not gonna say, hey, does the airbags deploy on time? You're not really worried about that with car seats and diapers. You're wanting to know if it's going to get the job done. So we learned all about that. Episode 5. Episode 6, we decided to pivot a little bit. We didn't necessarily touch on a lot of our story early on in this podcast, so we thought we'd kind of come back to it now. Kevin and I have 2 totally different stories, 2 totally different ideas of how we kind of went through IVF, the things we did, the things we experienced. So we thought now that we've kind of warmed up, we've kind of got you guys, listening and coming back every week, we thought we'd dive back into our IVF journey. Sorry, can't talk. That's just a similarity on this podcast. I won't be able to speak. So we'll touch on Kevin's story first. Kevin's story is going to be in part 1, and then we'll have a part 2. So stay tuned. Next week will be my version of our IVF journey. So, Kevin's story's first. Kevin's going to be first talking about that. We're going to kind of ramble through some questions about just what went down, how it felt, where it went, any unexpecteds, just kind of covering all of it. So we're going to spend the next 50 to an hour just kind of talking about Kevin and his wife's journey through IVF. Sound good, Kev?
Yes, sir.
All right, so, going through IVF or finding out IVF, like, how did that feel? Is that something that you guys, when you first got married, did you guys know already? Or did she know already? Or is that something you guys kind of found out through marriage?
Necessarily more so during marriage, but also with there was one time she had like a IUD fallout, and that kind of tossed some red flags, and so she went to go get checked, and then they were like, hey, you got a blockage or on one of your ovaries, and so that right there kind of like came into play because we was like, all right, well, we're wanting a family, so let's just test the waters and do what you do, and nothing comes up as far as the lady going to do to the appointments and doing a test. So that's kind of how we figured out that, hey, like, obviously something's wrong, and so we had to do more of a deep dive on it.
So going through that part, like, what was your first immediate reaction, and kind of what was what was your wife's like? Were you guys both kind of in the similar reaction part of like complete shock? Had she was this kind of like not hereditary by any means, but had she been
Right.
around people who had spirit who had I can't talk again. Sorry, folks. Had experiences before, and so she kind of knew what was going on. Or I mean, you kind of touched on it too. Like when you said IVF, you're like, what the hell is that? Right?
Oh
What are
yeah,
we
for
doing?
sure.
So
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
kind of kind of blind to it. But what was she like?
I think for her initial like reaction, she was kind of like shocked, surprised because like you see where like her mom and dad was able to have two kids. You see her aunt have four kids, and then her
Mm-hmm.
grandma had kids. So it's like it was never within the question of like, okay, well, I got issues. You know what I'm saying? Because you see the whole family. You just followed like the family tree. You're
Mm-hmm.
going down and you're like, okay, well, no one's having issues. Why am I the person that's having issues? And so like just doing your investigation and doing a deep dive and just going down the rabbit hole and appointment after appointment, just seeing how things uh go and doing surgery here just to see if this will work, and then shooting from the hip and going for it, and realizing that it's not paving out the way that you plan, and then you realize, hey, okay, well, what are ways that we can have our own family, IVF, you start doing your own research and start you know joining groups, talking to your doctor about IVF. So for her, I think she was surprised because, like I said, she didn't get to witness it like firsthand, but like through family. So
Mm-hmm.
she was definitely surprised and shocked.
So like knowing that, obviously that again, we'll say this probably a million times on this podcast throughout its course of its life, but IVF is tough and it's really hard to kind of like put into words what each person goes through, husband, wife, you know, family around them. Um, but like kind of knowing that and knowing what you're facing with IVF, obviously you're looking things up, she's looking things up. You guys are kind of coming together, praying about it, learning more things as it comes about. What did it kind of feel like knowing that you were fertile and your significant other, your spouse, the person you love, the person that you cherish so much is kind of going through this kind of journey and you can't really fix it. So like what was your mentality?
Right.
Like how was that process, and like what did you kind of do to kind of not necessarily like take the pain away, but kind of like comfort her in in this trying time?
I would say for me, I don't think I ever thought about the whole process of like, oh, um, it's not me. It was just necessarily just making sure that I was able to help when I'm able to fit in. Helping her understand certain things. Now, granted, I couldn't be at every appointment, but asking her questions when she's done with an appointment. But I don't think I ever had that thought factor in my mind of like, oh, I'm fertile. Like I'm
Hmm.
I'm able. And shoot, thinking about it now, I never wound up like getting tested just to see if it was me. We just kind of figured what her doctor told us was like, okay, a doctor they do, hopefully they do their, due diligence and do their research, and they know everything. So,
Hmm.
um, just kind of going off based off their word,
Hmm.
and so, I don't think I ever thought about that for me, but I definitely felt some type of way of like knowing that like this is what we wanted, and she was having to go through that whole process to just for us to have a child. So yeah, that's just pretty much how I felt.
Yeah, I'm just to touch on the other question. The thing for me, and again, this is not the podcast that I'm going to talk about myself, but just going through IVF, you turn to, I want to say, you tend to kind of lean towards the more of a help or be helped, and if you
Hmm.
don't turn to either one of those, you kind of feel helpless. So, did you ever feel in that scenario of you know the first initial thought of being like, I don't know what to do, right? Like you can't take that portion away. Unfortunately, this is the route we're going down. You're a very, very selfless guy. Like you try to help everybody you can. So I can only imagine what you felt going, and helping your old lady. So it's like, did you ever feel helpless at any point of that, early stages of IVF being like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do?
No, most definitely. Definitely when she's going to these appointments and she's getting all these test results back, and she's like, well, this needs to be here at this level, and this needs to be higher, and this needs to be this percentage. Definitely at times, you feel hopeless, but at the exact same time, you just kind of keep your faith in God. Like, all right, I may not be able to help, but you know what I can do is be be in a moment with you. Be present, and try to comfort you, and try to um, figure out a route for me to kind of you know s- keep the positivity. You know what I'm saying? Because it's tough. It's tough for the women. I don't want to go like deep into like talking about guys as well, but like women, they take on a lot. They take on the world when it comes to game time of trying to have a family. So
And especially, being the fact that I think infertility is always kind of like the what they call the black sheep in the room. That might be the
right,
wrong term, but like it's something that it stands out, but it doesn't. And so, you know, dealing with that, and especially, I've become friends with you and your wife, and you guys are very, you know, you wear your hearts on your sleeve. You're very caring people, and going through IVF, it opens up a lot of avenues for darker places, right? And so, kind of going through that with your wife, were there ever moments where you felt that, you know, let me ask the question: how did you keep the spirits high? How did you kind of keep, um, with every appointment that kept coming up, with every blood draw, with every medication that you felt like you were administering? Like, how did you keep the spirits high? Like, I know you're a guy that lifts up our entire department.
right,
But I work with you at work, right? So, well, how did you kind of like lift the spirits? Like, this is a really, lack for a better term, kind of shitty scenario, right? So it's like,
right.
how do you kind of keep the spirits high throughout that, or how did you kind of you know support her in that way?
Right. I'm big on my communication. So, communicating, being more present, being able to ask those difficult questions, and trying to figure out, how can we navigate through this, these murky waters, and, um, kind of keep the spirit up high. You pray about it, you talk to God, and, we tend to do that every night. So,
Mhm.
with us doing that, and just kind of just knowing that, hey, look, it's on God's time and it's on God's faith, but just do know, when God's time is right, it's right. And so, um, just necessarily just showing that hey, this is something I'm willing to stick my guns to, and gun ho, and keep walking tall, and poke my chest out and keep my head up high, because granted, it may not work out when we plan to work out, but just know in due time, and in God's time, and it's gonna work. So just definitely just being patient with her, and just being present.
What kind of you know dealing with IVF and whatnot is an interpersonal journey, right? You all, or we all, right? We're kind of a family at this point. People who go through it, you're kind of going through it selectively together, but also alone at the same time. And so, were there people in your corner, family, friends who maybe weren't necessarily understanding the journey or what was going on? And how difficult was that kind of trying to like, inform them, but also kind of keep them on a basis? Like, what was that like? And kind of like trying to bring people along in the journey and just kind of like keeping people informed just on things that maybe they didn't need to know, but they cared enough to know.
Right. Definitely when it came down to like our parents, we just said, hey, Ellie's infertile. We're not able to conceive a, a child normally, but we took them through the process of understanding, what was the issue, how we are gonna address it, and then
Mm-hmm.
just pivoting from there, and just shooting for it. And so for the most part, they were really good at like being like receptive and understanding it, and like, okay, all right, kind of keeping our patience up. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mm-hmm.
keeping our hopes up, and cheering us on. Like, okay, all right, they give us reinsurance, like, y'all gonna be good. We're gonna pray on it. Whatever y'all need, we got you. If we need to do anything X, Y, and Z, just let us know. But though those were the ones that like kind of like kept the faith up high. Because at the exact same time, we felt like at some points we felt like we were kind of doing it by ourselves. Granted, yeah, we are going through the journey. It's just us two dealing with this, So when you on the outside looking in and seeing everybody else, kind of moving through the motions of life, you tend to kind of like pivot to those ones that's close to you.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I've really loved through our journey. And obviously it made a huge impact in yours. But like, you know, we always say that yeah, we're going through this alone, but I think it takes a village and it takes an army to kind of go through something like this. Because like, sure, you'll walk into days and you'll think, man, this is the toughest day ever, and then the next day gets even tougher. And so, having people around you and we've got coworkers who care and obviously family members, but you don't realize how big your army is until you're so far in it, and then people
Yep.
just keep asking, and it's not because they're nosy, it's because they care, right?
Yep.
They've invested at least their part of their life into your journey and figuring out, okay, what needs to be done, what happens next, and that is huge because at the end of the journey, and when I say end, I mean getting that confirmation of, hey, it worked. Hey, it stuck. Hey, you're officially pregnant. Congratulations. That congratulations weighs so much more than I think a lot of people realize who are able to conceive naturally, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when you find out naturally, it's a maybe a missed cycle, or hey, I'm gonna take this pregnancy test on a whim. They find out they're pregnant, and it's this wave of emotions like no way, like whatever. Like for us going through IVF, unfortunately it's not a surprise. It's
Right.
more of a, this is the reward that I say reward with a grain of salt, because you know a child is shouldn't be looked at as a reward, it's a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
that's all that we're trying to achieve going through IVF. Kevin and I was to be able to have a blessing of a child, right? And so sorry to be long-winded, but that whole part of creating an army and a team behind you are people that are going to be in that corner no matter what, good or bad. They're going to be there. Obviously, they're going to be there to support you like on the bad, but they're going to be able to cheer you on for the good. Which brings me to my next question: is like, did you ever feel, or let me get to this other question first. So going through IVF, was there anything that kind of popped up out of the blue that you were just completely just thrown for a loop, or was there anything that you guys kind of I guess came upon? And you don't have to go to specifics, medications. That shit is for the birds. But was there anything that you guys came across that you were just not prepared for?
I'll probably say when she had to have like a procedure, to, how can I say it, kind of like clear out some of the blockage to see if
Mm-hmm.
that was going to be one of the things that help us conceive a child normal. Even with us doing that, and it's still not working out. Um, that was definitely one of the things that was like, yo, hold on, wait a minute, kind of take a step back and like kind of like reflect a little bit. It was like, all right, well, we tried this, that didn't work. So what are our chances of just going through the whole embryo and the whole um play by play of the IVF process? So that right there is something that kind of like we had to take a step back and reflect on.
So like going through that procedure and kind of like understanding like, all right, well, we did what we could, we tried what we tried. This isn't happening for us. When you guys found that out, did you go back to the drawing board? Did you guys talk about other options and scenarios, or were you guys just kind of like, did you guys take a minute to just kind of like relax? Because again, people were gonna hear this and they're not gonna really expect much about what we went through mentally. We can't really put those into words now. Like it's just feelings and emotions that we felt. But were you guys did you guys take a little bit of a break uh, in the scenario and kind of think about best case, worst case?
No, man. For us, we just charge forward. Okay, all right, well, this didn't work. The hell with it. On to the next. So what we got to do? And you start going through, the appointments, and doing the egg retrieval and all the other appointments that's all within that. And we just shot for it. Because we was like, this is something we want. I mean, we want to announce it. What we got to do to figure this out. So what are the next steps? And so we just went for it.
Going through that part of it, and we're gonna get on into the nitty gritty here in a minute about egg retrievals and whatnot. But one question I wanted to ask before we got to that point was, this is a really like humbling scenario, and one of the things that I found myself, asking myself often was, you know, could I have done something different to change the outcome? And we'll get to my story next week. But for you, seeing that your wife was infertile, having that this play out in front of you, how were you able to kind of compartmentalize your emotions and your feelings and your thought process differently than hers, and how did you guys kind of come together and talk about that? Was there, like you said, communication's a huge thing for you? Was that something that you guys did well during that process, knowing that you guys were kind of both silently kind of going through different things? You were thinking differently, differently than she was. So how did you guys kind of like come together and talk about it, effectively, just to make sure everybody was on the same page?
For me, when it comes down to like emotion and stuff, I definitely, when it comes down to the lady and baby girl, like, hey, my I might sound selfish, but hey, I'm gonna put my feelings aside and put y'all first. So we gonna figure this out, and for us, I put my feelings, emotions aside, because guess what? I'm not the one that's having to do X, Y, and Z to make this happen. Like I said, I might be selfish, but for us, it was just necessarily coming up with the next game plan and steps to see it through. And so, with her, getting more information, as far as from like a doctor or doing research, joining Facebook groups and kind of seeing stuff from the outside looking in. She would spin back and relate the message to me, and I would ask her questions at times on certain things and pick her brain on stuff. But she definitely did one hell of a job on keeping me up to date with everything. But like I said, I put my feelings aside because I'm not the one that's doing all this stuff to make this happen.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point, because you're just trying to figure out what to care about when, right? And you're like I said, you're a selfless guy. Like, you put everyone before yourself, and you can see that just at work. Um, so I can't imagine kind of like how that role amplified throughout IVF. Um, just being attentive, right? I think that's a good word to use in the scenario, is just being present and being attentive. In your case, I think just really opened the door for more communication and more transparency from you and Ellie. And I mean, obviously, it worked. You guys understood the process, the treatment. So getting into, like I said, the nitty gritty, treatments, plans, all the good stuff. We're gonna talk about this for the next probably 10 minutes, because there's so much to discuss. Everybody, buckle up, because I'm gonna probably talk your ear off. When you guys kind of decided the treatment plan and all that stuff, was there anything that you kind of like were a little worried about? Was there things that you saw in the treatment plan, medication wise, that you were nervous about? We kind of already discussed you being quite the nurse, or nurse in training. But was there anything? Was there
Slightly.
anything that was there anything that came up that you were just like nervous about or just unsure of?
Um, Definitely. I don't want to deep dive into the first company that we wound up going through, but the stuff that we had to do, more so her, um, was kind of like, all right, you got this. You need these medications. Now, when it comes to medication, my boy, this ain't no Breaking Bad. I'm not the best at knowing what medicine does what and and all that. So that part was action A. But as far as like my biggest role was shots, she was good on having an alarm clock on when to take medicine, when to take what medicine. I would help her organize her medicines for the day. But as far as all that was just something like that we kind of collectively did together. But no, man, it was just doing those, and then necessarily going going here to do this, you start doing research on certain places you got to go for your appointment. Like, okay, what's the feedback on this? Um, but just the process of how we had to go, like, bam, 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 on a go, on the
Mm-hmm.
fly. All right, everything was like scheduled, tight knit, and
Mm-hmm.
definitely when we um flew out to where we flew out the first time. I was kind of skeptic because here I am in a different state, out here getting ready to do this transfer and stuff like that. But you know, yeah, that was one of the things that I was kind of like questioning about because I was like, yo, we got to do all this just for this.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And that's the cool thing that I've kind of like come to appreciate is how structured and how like organized everything really is. And it kind of in the moment you kind of feel like this is just like chaotic. But you know, the clinic that we used, everything was mapped out. Everything was kind of like you saw it, you were experiencing it. They were very, very open and transparent with what you could experience, what you won't experience. And we just thoroughly appreciated the scheduling, right? Like
Oh, for
I
sure.
love having a schedule. I love having, alarm clocks and whatnot and just being able to be structured. And so that was helpful. I mean, I know you guys had gone to a couple different facilities, but like going through, the egg retrieval, was that something that you were, you know, you guys were stressed about, happy about? Like, what were your emotions kind of going into that? Because that is a huge part of the whole thing.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Definitely the first time around. Like I said, we got lucky on baby girl on the first try, but trying for this second one, man, it tests your patience, and there's this ups and downs and mixed emotions on everything, and the whole egg retrieval definitely when they give you like the different like gradings and ratings on them.
Hmm.
And you're like, okay, all right, well, this is strong. This, and then they X-nay whatever. It's not the best, not the strongest, but when we wound up doing that, we were like, okay, well, shoot, we got four. Okay, well, let's test them. And I think during that whole process of like us trying to figure out what gender was what, I don't know, you start thinking of things in your head like, you do the transfer and it's like, all right, well, this one don't work. Okay, this one don't work. And so on and so forth. And you're like, maybe testing them is probably not the best idea because
Hmm.
they freeze them. They
Yep.
freeze them and store them away. And so,
Hmm.
we start getting in our heads thinking, well, maybe freezing them and unthrowing them out ain't the best. That's those are just things that we put in our head, but who
Hmm.
knows if that's true or false at the exact same time. So
Yeah, what Kevin was referring to, folks that don't know the IVF terminology, is the PGTA test, is what he's referring to when it comes to like understanding the grades, understanding what it is, whether it's a boy, whether it's a girl. You kind of find out, do they have all their chromosomes? Do they not? Um, it's very, very cool that, like I said, Kevin and I were born in a generation where IVF is so, you know, similar and familiar to everyone. Technology has definitely advanced. Now you get to find out everything that you really need to know before, D-Day or, delivery day.
yeah,
And so you kind of find that stuff out early. You kind of get to, when he's talking about, the embryos, right? You're finding out what you have, how many you have of them, the grading, those are, once it reaches a certain, you know, day of blasto, that's important. The grading of cells, how well those cells will stick to the inside of the uterus. Um, those are all very important numbers. And Kevin and I got to, do a, education 101 on understanding what all that meant. Because for me, I was like, 4AB. That sounds pretty damn good. If we're going off of like the educational system, like, all right, cool. Like he's somewhere between like an A minus and a B plus, like
right.
cool. And then you realize, no, that's not exactly how that works. So you definitely get humbled. Very, very educational is what IVF would be for the outsiders looking in. You learn a lot of things that you don't necessarily know going in. Embryos,
X.
just how absolutely they're strong. They're being injected with so many steroids. They're being frozen. They're being transferred. They're being. I mean, embryos are just strong. They're bulletproof in a way, right? That's what you find out. When they send them off for a PGTA test, people don't always opt into that because when they do that, they have to take a biopsy of the embryo. In some cases, some rare cases, they will puncture the embryo and it will, die off. That's something that you risk. Depending on what you do when you get an egg retrieval, you could have anywhere from, 25 to 5. And so if you have less, eggs to work with and they're sending them off for PGTA, you're not always going to come back with 5. You might come back with 3. You might come back with, a larger number. So there's a lot of things that go into, just making sure that that embryo is at its strongest, right? We tried to, at least my wife and I scenario, I'm sure Kevin and Ellie did the same thing, but you try to pick the strongest embryo because you have the higher upside of it working. And going through IVF, you kind of want to see it work. But so going back into your journey and kind of understanding that, transfer day happens, right? We're talking about baby girl, right? So transfer day, what's your emotions? What's your thought process? What's going through that dome of yours on transfer day?
Oh man, walk into the facility and wait. You sit in that chair, you waiting patiently. All right, I'm supposed to be here this time. You early because you anticipating everything. You just questioning yourself, questioning things. All right, well this is gonna work. We're gonna be good. We'll see. But we walk into the facility and like I said, we wait patiently, and then they call her back there, and you know, sure enough, my stomach's just twisted in knots, bro. Like I'm just like, oh, it's like I don't have some bad oodles and noodles. I'm just overthinking. I'm like, all right, how long this gonna take? I mean, how's the procedure going? And wound up, the doctor we had said, hey, Kevin, come back here, and this is before we knew what we were having, before we knew we were having baby girl. And he does what he needs to do, and I'm watching it and I'm all like, oh man, that's crazy. And he's like, all right, there it goes. And I was like, look, I'm chocolate, she vanilla, we best to have a little Patrick Mahomes. Surprise, surprise, had a baby girl. So, but the process it was definitely something that was like enlightening, because you you go through all the like the emotions of just thinking what if and how it's going to be and things that you plan on doing if this works out, people that you want to tell, um but everyone that we had in our corner, they stand 10 toes down and just like supported us and just you know gave us prayers and just kept us uplifted and was like, hey, look, we're excited. We don't know what y'all having yet, but we excited. Definitely more so like the grandparents, because they stay first granddaughter. So
Mhm.
um that definitely it was something enlightening and something to appreciate.
Going into that, transfer day, and transfer day is like some may say it's like the Super Bowl.
Mhm.
It's there's so much that leads up to it. There's so many things like you're making game plans and you're making lists. You're checking them twice. Have we done everything that we needed to do up to this point? You know, Obviously there's a lot of heightened emotions, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress that goes into those transfer days. It's To some it's a very quick day. It happens so fast, but you tend to get caught up in emotions. So Kevin, my question to you, because I know I cried like a little baby. What was that transfer like for you? Did you kind of sit in that chair and as it's happening, you were just like, this is amazing. Like this is all you ever thought it was going to be and more. I know it wasn't as traditional as it's supposed to be,
Right,
but
right.
it still happened. Were you overcome with emotions?
I would say the first time around when we wound up having a baby girl, I would say yeah, because it's just you're overwhelmed and you start thinking of you know you start thinking about the future. You start
Yeah.
planning about the future. And for us, it was like, look, we just prayed that, hey, this is gonna work. It's gonna work.
Mhm.
But my emotion is like, this is actually happening. And the lady looked at me, was like, oh, she's excited, and
Mhm.
I'm excited. I'm stoked. I'm like, all right, I just kind of want to, reach out, call somebody. Let me tell somebody, But everybody knew. But at the exact same time, it was like, the anticipation of waiting, of knowing that this actually worked. And so once we got wind that it did, it was like, man, we better be blessed, because us going through the process of this whole journey, like I said, it's been mixed emotions, but when you finally get that call and you get them test results back, man, you get overwhelmed, bro.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's so fun to watch is, I mean, my wife said it today during one of our ultrasounds is you just felt like, how am I only, so many weeks along? I feel like I've been pregnant for the last 9 months. That has been our journey. We were, going through IVF for at least 9 months. In your case, you know, seeing that implantation, seeing the embryo, knowing about this embryo for as long as you guys did, you kind of felt like, oh, we're already pregnant. But then, like you talked about, the waiting game, right? Like once it's implanted, you have to wait. I believe it's, I can't remember what we did, but there's a waiting period between 7 to 10 days. Um, I believe at 10 days, I think you can start testing and doing all this random stuff. We won't get into if Ellie tested 30 times a day, 10 times a day, 1 time a day.
It was
I'm just
crazy
kind of
though. It was.
I'm imagining so that she did in fact test way before she should have.
Yep.
But I mean, but that's the thing, right? Like you work your ass off to get to a point of, can I find out if I'm pregnant, right?
Right.
And that
Right.
that for our ladies, that's like their Super Bowl, right? Like being able to, it's the culmination of everything. The
Yep.
surgery for Ellie, it's the medications, it's the blood tests, it's the going through all the scheduling, going through all the medications, going through all the appointments, all of that stuff leads to positive or negative. And as soon as you get that positive test, I'm not saying that this happens for everybody. It's like there is a little bit of weight. There's a lot of pressure that's lifted off of those shoulders because now it's come to fruition, right? The things that you've been praying about, the things you've been talking about, the things that you've been dreaming of are not just, you know, thoughts now. It's reality. So
Yep.
now kind of like figuring that out. Were you with Ellie? How did this whole happen? How did this whole thing happen? Were you in the same room? Did she
Oh
surprise you with something?
yeah.
Like, how did you
Yeah.
guys find out officially that you were pregnant with baby girl?
Yeah. Take that back. Double back. So she waited for me to get home um after work to surprise me. And so I remember, coming home and she she decorated the kitchen, pink balloon. She had one of them little string decoration. It's a girl, and I was like, oh, snap. Okay. I'm stoked. I'm excited. I'm like, all right, all right. Now look, look, look. She ain't here yet, but we need to figure out some names. Like we gotta gun hold these. We gotta figure out some names. You cook up a list, I cook up a list. We'll figure this out together. But there's actually something like just being stoked and excited for it, because it's like, man, like you feel like you get knocked down, you know, multiple times, but you get up. You know what I'm saying? Every
Mhm.
every time you get up, and eventually it's like it's just relief, bro. Just relief, because it's like no matter what we went through, and what appointments we were told, this, that, and the third, or her having surgery, man, we just felt relief and just kind of just be within the moment, soak it up, because now at that point, boy, you couldn't tell me nothing. I was about to take over the world.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, you feel like you have superpowers.
Right.
Once that happens, you just feel like you feel like nobody else is around. Like you just like, at least that's how we've kind of come to it. Is just like we're just living in a different world.
Hmm.
Um, going through all the hardships and going through IVF is just an absolute journey. During that journey, did your faith in God ever waver? If it did, what brought it back?
I would definitely say it did at times. You know what I'm saying? Because you going through these trials and tribulations, and you talking to God, you talking to God, every night, and trying to figure out, you're questioning it, like, well, why does this gotta happen to us, But
Mhm.
also thinking that, in the grand scheme of things, he got plans mapped out. Even when you don't notice, that there's things set in motion for you, whether it's good or bad. There's pros and cons to this life shit. And so, with us, it was just being able to come together and just keep the faith.
Mhm.
Like I said, at times when you feel like your life being tested, or certain things are just kind of in question, um, you snap back into reality. You start thinking, the creator did all this, and he does everything for a reason. So, that's when at that moment when we um finally got the results, and I was like, okay, you know what, we realized this was on your time, and what I'm saying, I shouldn't question you, but at the exact same time, there was a moment where I lost faith, but like I said, snap back into reality. He's the creator of all things. He does things for a reason, and so that right there was like the determining factor. Was like, all right, you don't question the maker. I believe. Got to keep that faith strong.
And I think that's the thing we've touched on a couple times on this podcast is just understanding the why. Um, we're not always going to, right? And that's not for me to decide. And that's not for you to decide either. Like you said, like at one time in our life we'll meet our maker. That's not
Mhm.
this time, but you understand why, right? It's not me that's deciding this. It's something greater. Um, at some point I'll understand why, or maybe you've already found your why. But most of the time, the why is both personal and just understanding that you're here for a greater purpose than what you already believe you're here for. And I think that's the biggest part to think about. Going through all this journey and whatnot, you're not really necessarily thinking that, or if you are, you're like, I don't really think I should be. But living it, feeling it, seeing it, right? Seeing it is obviously D-Day, delivery day, right? When everything
Right.
comes to you know the grand finale, and going through IVF, going through the journey, understanding what all went down. Was there a point in time, and we'll get into this in just a second, was there a point in time where you were like, maybe you didn't feel like a dad, but what was the part of the journey that made you feel like a father? Before she was even here, what was that part of the journey where you were like, all right, I've got this?
Man, um, we talking about way before she's even here.
Way before
um,
yeah.
um, Probably say more so the moment we got notice, that
Mm,
that we got the green light, you know. Um at that point, you got to just put in your pants like everybody else, strap up your boots, and go forward with it. Start handling your business, start figuring out, the things that you need to get together to plan to have this child, to bring this child into this world, and you know for myself, I know I touched bases on it. My biggest thing was doing anything that my father didn't do for me, you know,
mm,
and so with that being said, is being present, and being there and being able to plant that seed and watch it grow and give it everything it needs until the maker decides that it's my time to go. But
mhm,
I would definitely say more so when we got the green light, that was when I knew I'm built for this shit. I'm meant for
mhm.
this.
So touching on that, right? You're built for this. When you hear that heartbeat and you see that ultrasound, and you check in on those ultrasounds and they're growing faster than we could ever imagine.
Yeah.
What's your thought process? What's your thoughts? What's your feelings with your wife when you're in those appointments? Now, I know you weren't going to all of them, but I know that you were a part of some. How does that? What is that feeling like being in that room, having going through all of that, seeing like it just come to being a human? What is that feeling like, right? As a brand new dad, right? A dad to be in that scenario, right? We're talking about baby number one. What's that thought and those feelings in that room?
Um, I would say that the first time of seeing everything, there was this one company we wound up going to at one point, and they did an ultrasound, and you're kind of looking at everything, and you're like, yo, this shit is actually happening, and so just kind of thinking like, man, this is real. Um, now it's time for preparation, and so
Mm-hmm.
going forward with that, it was just, you know, like I said before, it's mixed of feelings, and you're overwhelmed, but you just kind of start thinking of everything. As
Yeah.
far as like, man, what I'm gonna do, what I'm gonna do, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do I want this beautiful blessing that we have received to go
Mm-hmm.
forth in the world? You start thinking about everything as far as like, what are they going to look like? What are
Mm-hmm.
going to be? What are their characteristics? Are they going to be funny? Are they going to be, quick to speak? How long is the process going to take? But you just start thinking about everything, from however old they are. As soon as the moment you get them in your hands, it's like, I'm blessed.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's such a fast process too. Like,
Right.
IVF felt like it was ages long, at least for us. And then the pregnancy journey, typically, around 40 weeks. But it just happens so fast, does it not, Kevin? Like it just
It
like,
definitely does. And you don't pay attention. Time flies. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're just like, oh man, I just remember we just got the test results and then, everything was good, and then
mhm,
you know, time flies by and then, next thing you know, they laid out on the bed and getting ready for everything. So,
mhm. Yeah, I mean, as soon as you got to think like implantation of the embryo happens around like 3 weeks, and then before you know it, they're at 10 weeks pregnant, and you're like, has it really been that long? And it feels like it
right.
was just yesterday, right? Like, I feel like it was just yesterday that we were going through an embryo like transfer. I feel like it was just yesterday we did an egg retrieval, and I'm sure you guys felt the same. It's like, how does everything happen so fast when it felt like it was just happening so slow? Is at least IVF for some people, it does feel like that, right? How many times did you look at the clock or look at the calendar and be like, oh man, we gotta wait till then?
Mm.
When you felt like it was so fast, like did you guys ever have that moment where you're like looking at the calendar and being like, oh my gosh, it's so far away?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Definitely when you in the first steps of the process of IVF is like, all right, we got this appointment set for this for that and a third, and then it's like, all right, we're gonna do, the transfer on this day, or egg retrieval, this, that, and the third, and then once you finally get to that point, it was like, damn, time fly by really fast, because like now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, damn, Ellie's only like, 21 weeks, you know?
Hmm.
So it's just like, shit.
No, yeah, for sure. It's very humbling, but also what's humbling about it is time, because you're just like, oh no, like we got a week.
Oh, for sure.
How quick a week just dissolves through IVF should be studied. Because like I know that like 7 days for some is like years. I mean, we're talking dog years. I mean, right? Like I felt like 7 days for like 7 years, and it just happened in a blink. So that's terrifying to think about that it just happened so fast. But again,
Oh, yeah.
we're all just trying to get to the same scenario, and we're so glad to be, in Kevin and I's cases, we're kind of out of our IVF journey now. We're into the pregnancy journey, but being
Yes,
able
sir.
to kind of like reminisce on the good times and the bad
Yes, sir.
has been fun. Last question for you, Kevin. This is kind of like an open ended question to a better you, a more experienced you. So, the question I have for you is if you sat across from the version of yourself that was just beginning the journey as present day you now, what would you tell them?
Tell them trust God. Trust the process. Just like any other given day. We are kind of walking through this life, and we're going through our own trial and errors and journeys. So definitely trust God. Put God first. You know what I'm saying? Don't question him, because like I said before, everything's on his timing. So just be patient. Be patient. You know what I'm saying? You knocking out the door. Ain't nobody answer yet, but just know somebody coming soon. And and guess who answering? It's God. So
Hmm.
definitely say just be patient. Trust the process.
I like that. Be patient. I think we touched on that 2 podcasts ago. Be patient. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with the
Yep.
process. Um, because if you start not being patient, you stop really understanding what you're going through. You stop really appreciating what you're going through. So
Hmm.
patience, 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 patience. I like that. Really good way to end it, man. Um, like I said, we're gonna do a 2 part to this episode. So this is part one. You get to kind of understand Kevin's perspective and kind of hear about him and his wife going through IVF and kind of what they thought about the process and how they went through it, what they experienced and whatnot. So I really appreciate you kind of being vulnerable with me, Kevin, and talking about that for the last hour. Um, Stay
No
tuned for
problem.
episode 2 or part 2 of episode 6. That's a mouthful. That'll be next week. You'll kind of hear about my rare story of IVF and kind of understanding that. So stay tuned for that. Like I said, we drop podcasts every Friday. Uh, Radical Dad is 5 episodes in. This will be our 6th. If you like what you hear, give us a follow, give us a like. If you're watching on YouTube, throw us a comment or two, throw us a subscribe. We would love to see your interactions with us. We've been really, really active on our social media accounts, posting on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Um, we love seeing you guys comment on our. We're doing this like new series where it's a hot take on a Monday. Nothing better to start your Monday off, rolling out of bed from the weekend and seeing a hot take from the Radical Dad podcast, right? So we really appreciate you guys kind of tuning in and commenting and kind of giving us some interactions. We've been really excited about the banter. Um, yeah, so give us a follow, give us a like, give us a subscribe if you're listening on YouTube. And yeah, we'll drop one every Friday. Also, stay tuned. This is kind of like I would say not breaking news, but stay tuned for some merch. We're working, behind the scenes on trying to get some Radical Dad merch out to the people. Not really sure when that will be available. We might do a pre-order. We might do, some one-offs. So if you're interested in some Radical Dad merch, throw us that in the comments. Hey, would love a shirt, would love a hat. You know, we wear our stuff from time to time. That's just because we like to self promote. But if you're interested, let us know. Some merch, some hat. We might do some koozies for those who are partaking in some adult beverages and whatnot. So just let us know in the comments, whether it be, on our YouTube channel, whether it be on our Instagram, our Facebook, or our TikTok. And last but not least, we're open to ideas. We're going to be starting to get some guests on the podcast very soon. We probably got another 5 to 7 episodes we'll do before we get guests on. But hey, if you'd love to be a part of the Radical Dad podcast and would love to, share your story or share some insight, hit us up in maybe a direct message or even give us an email. Email might be the best way, just so we can get some contact information from you and kind of schedule it from there. But hit us up on an email. Let us know if you're interested in coming on the podcast as a guest and maybe some topics you want to discuss a little bit further. Um, Behind me, and this is where I'm going to do my ad read. So bear with me, folks. Behind me, to my right, as I'm pointing on YouTube, is Dubby. Dubby is a basically energy in powder form. If you need energy, I highly recommend Dubby. It's a great supplement, super delicious flavors. I got beach and peach behind me. If you use code RADDADPOD, I believe you get 10% off your entire order. So that's pretty great. We love discounts as dads. Um, you know, I'm shopping in the clearance section nowadays, but that's Dubby. Right behind me to my left, over on my left hand shoulder, is Bucked Up. If you use code RADDAD1, you get 20% off your entire order. Bucked Up, very, very, I would say, mainstream. You can get it at your, local Walmart. I believe, supplement superstores. There's a lot of things. They make everything you need. Collagen, your pre-workout, you name it, they'll make it. Behind me is an energy drink. They make those too, 300 milligrams of caffeine, 5 to 10 calories per serving. All the energy, no jitters. I mean, you can't beat that, right? As a dad working a 2 a.m. shift, making sure the baby's getting fed, getting put down nice and properly, get you a bucked up. You're going to go to bed feeling nice and awake because you're going to be back up at 4 a.m. Doing the same exact thing. So hit us up. RadDad1 is the code for that. Bucked up, highly recommend, delicious stuff. And our newest sponsorship is the Cowboy Revolution apparel. If you use code, now bear with me, folks. Now, if you guys enjoy the podcast, you have Kevin to thank for this long code. It's Radical Dad Podca. That's Radical Dad PODCA. And I believe you get 15% off your entire order. My apologies for how long that is, but that will just give you a reminder of who sent you. Get all your apparel. I love their stuff. I was wearing a hat last episodes. I'm not wearing it now. But yeah, let us know what you get when you get it. Thanks again for tuning into the podcast. I'm gonna stop rambling. Stay tuned for episode 6, part 2 next week. And yeah, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a subscribe, and thanks for tuning in, folks. Kev, why don't you send us out?
All right. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. It's your boy K Hill. Y'all stay humble and blessed. Peace.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much.